evening, everyone. A warm welcome to IREX Residency and Citizenship Conclave Virtual Edition. It's great to have you all joining us from different countries, along with our esteemed speakers on this platform. Looking at these challenging times, we at GMN Media have put together this platform as an opportunity to educate all our esteemed investors, investment bankers, lawyers, immigration consultants about attractive citizenship and residency programs on offer. This presentation will be for 15 minutes, followed by 10 minutes of Q&As. I would request all our attendees to be on active speaker mode. During time of Q&A, all attendees are requested to click the raise your hand button on your screen, and you will be allowed to ask your question. We'll unmute you so that you can ask your question. Since we only have 10 minutes for Q&As, in case you didn't get a chance to ask your question or your query remains unanswered, the presenters will be available to speak to you in their virtual booth at the IREX Residency and Citizenship Virtual Exhibition. We'll post the link on the chat for your reference. Without further delay, I would like to introduce our presenters, Mr. Ignacio Donoso, founder and managing attorney, and Mr. Dennis Tristani, senior partner at Donoso and Partners, LLC. They will be presenting on new opportunities for US and Canadian immigration. Over to you guys, Dennis and Ignacio.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and we're delighted to be here. My name is Ignacio Donoso. I'm founder and managing partner of Donoso and Partners, a law firm focused on specialized business immigration and comp visa processes for the United States and Canada. I will be speaking about Canadian immigration. I'm a dual licensed Canadian lawyer and an American lawyer, and my partner Dennis will be speaking about US immigration. There's been a lot of changes over the last 12 months, and we're participating in this event. Frankly, the last time we visited India was precisely for this event, and it was a very special visit. We're glad to be back. Even if we're back virtually, we're delighted to be back. Yes, please take it away.
Thank you, Ignacio, and just a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us virtually. This is exciting, and as Ignacio mentioned, we really enjoyed our time in Mumbai last year. And it's amazing, it's been over a year that we were there in person, and we're excited to be here virtually, and wanted to thank IREX for putting this together. I think we can move to the third slide in the presentation, please. So just briefly, these are the four topics we'll be covering in our quick presentation today, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions. But as Ignacio mentioned, over the last 12 to 18 months, there's been quite a bit of turmoil in the immigration world, which has essentially gone hand in hand with what's been going on around the world with COVID. And we're now at a point of change in terms of US immigration, and the new administration has brought forth what will be helpful reform and policy that we believe will be very important and helpful for individuals seeking to move and establish their life in the US over the coming years. The topics we'll be covering are here on the screen, and we'll jump into number one, so we can move the slide, please. So as many of you probably know, 2020 was a difficult year, and was made more so in terms of immigration to the United States because of difficult policies that the past administration passed, largely taking advantage of a difficult COVID-19 pandemic and a difficult economic situation in the US, whereby President Trump passed certain proclamations and policies that restricted US immigration, especially for family-based categories and work-based categories, with very few exceptions. This made individuals who were spouses, children of permanent residents, many professionals, managers, executives, academics around the world have to wait to enter the US to continue their immigration path and begin their lives, which was very, very difficult. Fortunately, and as many people thought would occur, the Biden administration has reversed this policy just last month. It occurred within the first month of his presidency. This proclamation, which is Proclamation 10014, was reversed, allowing green card holders who are outside the US, who have been waiting for their interview, to now move forward with their interview process and come to the US. Again, this policy was one of the most negative policies of the Trump administration, and we believe that President Biden and his administration will continue to either terminate or let more restrictive policies that were passed simply lapse and not follow up on them. So we're hopeful that this first step is something that's going to bring more positive change in the future. We can move on to the next slide. So just last month, this was the US Citizenship Act of 2021 was one of President Biden and his team's most important, I would say, initial legislative accomplishments in terms of introducing a comprehensive immigration bill, which is something that hasn't been done in quite some time. And the immigration bill is large, it's comprehensive, and it seeks to tackle many issues that have made US immigration somewhat difficult and somewhat a hot policy topic in the news over the last few years. Again, this bill hasn't been passed yet. It's being debated in Congress right now. And the main goals, and again, it's a large bill, but some of the main goals are to legalize many of the undocumented immigrants in the United States who have been working and living here with their families and allow them to have a more secure path to residency. It also seeks to reduce green card backlogs for employment-based immigrants, which, as many of you know, in India is one of the most significant issues facing academics, professionals who are living in the US, who have been living there for many years, but because of the visa wait list, they haven't been able to move on to permanent residency. They've simply been in a temporary work status, which is unstable. And finally, the bill does have some provisions which seek to make the illegal immigration something that essentially to reduce it, but in a more humane way than previous administrations have done to strengthen our borders, but doing so in a fair and just manner. Next slide, please. These are some of the key provisions of the bill. I won't jump into them in too much detail. One of the main provisions is to increase the number of visas, and this is something that has been discussed for many, many years. The bill would increase the number of visas to 170,000, and more importantly, it would allow the recapture of visas that have gone unused dating back to 1992, and that's roughly 225,000 visas that would be put into the system. And again, even if this bill does not pass, this is something that President Biden could potentially do through an executive order. So it's something that many immigration practitioners think has a chance of succeeding in the future. The bill would create improvements to age outs, which is a situation wherein, because of a visa wait list, young children can be separated from the family process if they turn 21 before visa is available to them. It's a terrible thing that can happen, and there are laws that help protect against this, but they don't do enough. And so the bill would provide protection to children and in order for them not to age out so they can stay with the family and immigrate with them. The bill would essentially have a cap on waiting lists for green cards. Again, because of visa wait lists, there are many individuals from India, from China and other countries who have been waiting for way more than 10 years for their green card. And so once you hit that 10-year mark under this new bill, there would be no more numerical limitations. So that would be something that would help many, many, many individuals seeking to immigrate to the US based on an employment-based green card. And again, finally, the elimination of the per country limit is a topic that's been discussed over and over again. It has a lot of support and would really reduce wait lists for Indian nationals who are seeking to immigrate in the EB1, EB2, and EB3 employment-based categories, which are subject to extreme wait list right now. So the elimination of the per country limit would allow more visas to be available for individuals from India in these categories. We can move to the next slide, please. Quickly, we'll touch on the Eb5 program. As Ignacio mentioned, that's one of our firm's strengths and an area at which we have lots and lots of experience. We filed over 3,000 petitions over the last 8 years. Just last year, USCIS confirmed that they were changing their adjudications policy and they were going to focus adjudication based on cases where the primary applicant is not subject to a wait list. Now, for practical purposes, that means that cases that are not from China or Vietnam are supposed to and are being given adjudication priority at this point in time. That means cases from India, cases from Europe, Latin America. These individuals who have pending petitions should be given adjudication priority for their pending I-526 petition. And this is something that we've seen to slowly start to take effect as we've been seeing more approvals come in during the last 2 to 3 months. Next slide, please. Again, the new policy is intended to create faster processing. Right now, if you look online, USCIS processing times are very long. To be very honest with you, they're not accurate in the sense that what we're seeing on the ground today is processing for individuals in India at around 24 months after an I-526 petition is filed. We believe that this will get better over the course of 2021. Again, it's not something that's going to occur very quickly, but it is something that should continue to improve over 2021. And we do believe that an 18-month processing time will be available in the future. Next slide, I think this is the final slide. And finally, again, as many of you know, COVID has been very difficult in terms of immigration, and many consulates around the world have been closed. Processing has slowly started to improve. We're seeing consulates around the world reopen and focus not only on emergency processing, but also processing for certain spouses of US citizens, fiancé visas, which is currently what's going on in Mumbai. In Delhi, they're also resuming some limited processing of work visas, student visas. And you're seeing this also in major hubs around the world like Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Hong Kong. And most large consulates in India are now processing at a limited number. But again, this is something that we expect to improve, and things should be back to full processing hopefully by the summer or the fall of this year. I believe this is the last slide for the US portion of the presentation. And at this point, I'll give the floor to Ignacio, who's going to discuss some Canadian immigration topics with you.
Thank you, Dennis. Let's jump to slide number 11 with the map of Canada. Thank you. Next slide, please. Excellent. Thank you very much. So let's just jump right in and discuss why Canada. Very briefly, I think everybody knows that the standard of living and the lifestyle in Canada is very attractive. It's a member of the G7 group of nations, which are all highly industrialized economies that have a very high standard of living. So perennially, Canada has been one of the best places to live in the world. But in particular, today, it's attractive because it's, as I say in this slide, it's opening its doors. The number of immigrants that are being accepted into Canada is very high. And as we see here, it's officially at 350,000 immigrants. That means persons with permanent residency a year. The Canadian economy has been experiencing economic growth. It's on an upward trend for the last decade or so, and that's significant in terms of both establishing yourself in Canada, being able to find a job, or being able to successfully launch a business. Technology is mentioned because the technology sector in Canada has grown exponentially over the last 10 to 15 years and is a significant part of the economy in places like Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec. Again, I mentioned multiple programs, but what I mean by that is that there are many, many paths, many routes to be able to access permanent residency in Canada. And I think the biggest challenge that my clients face when investigating Canadian immigration is understanding the diversity of the programs. And I'll explain why in the next slide, but the number of programs is absolutely impressive. Also, the Canadian system, the Canadian immigration system requires immigrants at many skill levels. It's not just Nobel Prize winners that are needed. Canada is seeking skilled and non-skilled immigrants, and that's tremendously important. And finally, one of the things that is most important to our clients is how this will impact their children. And Canada has the benefit of one of the most, how can I say it, most successful public education programs anywhere in the world. High school education, elementary school education, university education is uniformly high quality, and it's also uniformly accessible at very reasonable prices because it's considered to be public. It's considered to be partly financed by the government at the federal and provincial level to make it accessible to almost everybody in Canada. So the landscape for landing in Canada as an immigrant is very attractive. So let's go to the next slide and start digging into the types of programs that are available. The main program for immigration to Canada is called Express Entry. And Express Entry is the famous point system. The famous point system that has been embraced by the Canadian government and immigrants since 2015 when it was first implemented. The point system is intended to allow people to register their profiles with the Canadian immigration authorities called Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC. And based on the features or elements of their profile, they're given a point ranking. And that point ranking then becomes their benchmark for being able to obtain permanent residency in Canada. And if you have sufficient number of points, you're selected. And if you don't, you're not selected. So it's very straightforward. There are no waiting lists. Once you register, the registration lasts for 12 months. And it's all very transparent and very straightforward. The problem is the following. The basic Express Entry program skews in favor of young professionals who are versed in English. So there are a lot of families that we advise that are a little older. They're in the 35, 36, even 40 years old, and they have children and they'd like to immigrate to Canada. And the truth is that they may not qualify under the point system because the point system, as I said, skews in favor of young professionals who know English. So by example, in this slide, I indicate that the typical points ranking that you need to achieve to be comfortably able to obtain permanent residency through the Express Entry program is approximately 468. It's been a little higher, it's been a little lower, but 468 is a good idea of what point ranking you're looking at. To qualify. And my team has straightforwardly qualified on this basis. And it's a real joy to see it because we were the family in the Express Entry system, and 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later or a month later, they're selected and they're offered an invitation to apply to become a permanent resident in Canada. It's extraordinary and incredibly transparent. The problem is, as I said, is that not everybody qualifies, and that's the nature of the express entry point system. It's not intended to capture everybody, but Canada doesn't simply say, well, you fit in our program. Sorry, they have created dozens, and I mean literally dozens of other immigration programs to allow people to immigrate to Canada, and in this month's number 1 program. This is a program for people that have worked in managerial at least 12 months of full-time work experience in such a job. Again, managerial, executive, or professional. They have to have a certain level of education. They have to Canadian language benchmark number 7, level 7, which is a pretty proficient level of English. And they have to have some other features. For example, if they have a job offer in Canada, that really blew their points under the Federal Skilled Worker Program. But the truth is, you don't need a job offer in Canada to qualify. So that's tremendously attractive. The Federal Skilled Worker Program not require Canadian work experience. So this in itself sometimes is another important path to allow a family to immigrate. The Canadian experience class, which is the next bullet on this slide, is very different. It's for persons that have at least 12 months of full-time work experience in Canada. So in order to qualify, you have to have worked in Canada at least 12, preferably in a job requiring professional, managerial, executive capacity. And that way you would then qualify for the permanent residency program. And after that, every province has their own provincial nominee programs. These are programs that allow the immigrant to be selected by the province to obtain immigration status in Canada, and that, called an invitation to apply, is then used for the point system by boosting the applicant 200 points. So since there are 10 provinces and every province has at least, you can see that there are literally dozens of programs that may be eligible for a person to immigrate to Canada. The challenge is to focus on the ones that are most appropriate for the family. That's what we really pride ourselves on, is to tailor our advice and not simply tell people, well, this is either not possible, or to tell them, well, it won't work because the point system is not in your favor. On the other, what we do is we really dig into the family's needs and try and find a program that may be amenable to them. And we frequently recommend some sort of investment because we find that typically changes completely the narrative and the success rate of a family situation. Let's go to the next slide. This slide is entitled Permanent Residency PNP, which means Provincial Nominee Programs. And as I said, there are 10 provinces in Canada, and every province has a provincial nominee program, except for Quebec, so 9 provinces. And they break down into 3 types of programs, and each type has many subcategories. So for example, typically provinces offer programs for skilled workers, international students, and for entrepreneurs. And those 3 types of programs end up being incredibly attractive. So for example, international students frequently come to Canada and they studies, and frequently they stay in Canada to work. Canada offers what's referred to as a post-graduation work permit to a graduating student for up to 3 years. And that only turns into the basis of a Canadian experience class application. Other provinces will try and attract students that are studying science, engineering, and will literally give them an invitation to apply under provincial nominee programs for just completing that study, that type of science, technology, engineering program. One of the local universities of that province. So that is incredibly attractive. And the entrepreneur programs are wonderful because they're very flexible, they're very transparent. And if you have the wherewithal, of course, it's attracted to pursue that as well. Let me see, let's go to the next slide. This permanent residence, federal entrepreneur programs and permanent residence. There are other programs that are attractive that allow for to start a business in Canada. It's called the Intercompany Transfer Program. We use this very, very frequently for launching operations of a successful business from India in Canada. And the this program is based on the fact that once the person lands in Canada, we may be then able to flip that into permanent residency after, for example, 1 year of work experience. And since the person is or executive position, launching operations in Canada, this becomes very, very attractive. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide is entitled Federal Entrepreneur Programs and Permanent Residence Recruitment-Based LMIA. So this is a big, big change in the last 12 months. The Labor Market Impact Assessment Program has been around for a long time. And the owner-operator option of this program has been around for a long time. And what happened just 3 weeks ago was that the Canadian government decided to shut down the owner-operator option of the labor market impact assessment. The owner-operator option, I'm not going to go into it too much, but basically it exempted persons that own their own business in Canada from having to comply with the recruitment requirements of labor market impact assessment. So now everybody who applies for it, even if you're an owner of your own business, you have to complying with the recruitment requirements, which have 3 features: to advertise your position, you have to have an employment contract that contemplates a good faith offer of employment and comply with the prevailing wage requirements, which is the minimum salary set by the Canadian government for the job. All of that was exempted in the past. It is no longer exempted starting April 1, 2021. It still allows the person to land in Canada with a temporary work permit and start their business. It's just that you can't avoid those 3 features: recruitment, employment contract, and prevailing wage of the labor market impact assessment anymore. That was a huge change, by the way, because we used the owner-operator variation of the LMIA program very successfully. So anyway, let's go to the next slide. So in relation to the COVID-19 crisis, I think what Canada has experienced is very similar to what other countries have experienced. They had to slow down appointments at consulates. There were travel restrictions, both outbound from India and inbound into Canada. In fact, Canada still has certain travel restrictions regarding COVID testing and quarantines. Those will all go away. At least I said earlier that Canada expected to attract 350,000 immigrants to Canada. Well, the COVID-19 crisis made that absolutely impossible. And Canada's immigration statistics underscore the fact that 2 things. Number one, the country was not able to attract that many immigrants because of logistics, because of the COVID-19 crisis. But at the same time, Canada went above and beyond to try and continue to achieve its immigration goals. And it shows the commitment of the Canadian government to immigration. And the best example that I can give of this is that approximately a month ago, the Canadian government took the Canadian Experience class, which again, it's for persons who are who have at least 12 months of work experience in Canada, okay? And they are typically people that are in Canada, physically present in Canada. They're typically people that have a job offer in Canada, at the very least, to have work experience in Canada. They took all applicants in that classification and they approved them. There was over 20,000 people getting permanent residency in Canada by the stroke of a pen. And that's extraordinary. I've never seen that in any country ever. And it does show that it really does, let's say, it does pay to be persistent and to try and pursue things at a time when, frankly, Canada is looking for immigrants. So if you're on the fence, if you're doubting about whether to do it, you're worried about COVID, I don't think this is the year to stay out of the game. I think this is the year where you want to put your hat in the ring and try and pursue something to obtain permanent residency in Canada. Because in the future, things will be back to normal and it'll be a little harder, frankly. So that's what I'm saying. And I think Canada's Minister for Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship went so far as to say that even though their official targets are 350,000 immigrants a year, Canada is going to seek to attract almost 400,000 immigrants to make up for the people that were not able to arrive to Canada during 2020. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide is entitled Application Centers and Travel Advisories. And as I said, Canada has experienced problems other countries that they've had to start processing and high commissions throughout the world affected by. Good news is that the Canadian government is resuming biometric appointments, which are so fundamental and are hard to come by over the last 12 months. So on February 24, Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada resumed biometric appointment services for permanent residents under any economic stream. And on January 20th, IRCC had resumed biometric appointments for work permit applicants. So again, they're getting back to normal. They're getting back to normal. And then you'll see in the last bullet I have here that everybody over the age of 5 has to get a COVID test 72 hours before their scheduled departure flight to Canada. And then once they arrive in Canada, they're also tested at the airport. They may be required to quarantine for at least 3 days in a hotel while they await their COVID test, and then they have to have a COVID quarantine plan out of the hotel after that. It's obviously a challenge for everybody, but we are turning a corner. I really do believe that we are turning a corner here in North America, and I expect that for the rest of the world, we'll see that as well. The next slide is our contact information. You'll see that Narushi, who is just our extraordinary and wonderful colleague based in Delhi. She is an Indian lawyer, an extraordinary professional, and is even more impressively, she is fully versed in both Canadian and US immigration because of her years of work with us. So many blessings for Arushi, because she is just such a wonderful part of our team. That's the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Ignacio and Dennis, for your presentation. We now invite questions from the attendees. You're requested to click the raise your hand button on your screen, and we'll unmute you so that you can ask your question. Lavanya, over to you.
Yes, so we have a question from Dinesh Chaudhary. Hi, Dinesh, please unmute yourself and ask your question. I'll give it to Nishant. Hi, Nishant, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, Nishant, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I did it. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So my brother is working in US right now in MasterCard, and his company is going to put his H1 visa. So if he gets married there, for example, so how come he can call up my parents over there? Is what we call that, I heard somewhere that dependent or so. Yeah. And yeah, could you throw some light? That's the first question. And could you throw some light about the latest situation of the law if there is some sponsorship thing going on for a visa? Somebody wants to sponsor also. Is there any current, what is the current situation by law in the Joe Biden's new policy or something? Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. Hi, Nishant. So to answer your first question, if your brother eventually becomes a US citizen, he will be able to sponsor his parents. The US immigration system allows US citizens to sponsor immediate relatives, which are their spouse, unmarried children under the age of 21, and parents. That isn't an option for permanent residents at the moment. So if your brother who's working for MasterCard continues to pursue his professional career and gets a green card and eventually citizenship through employment, or happens to marry a U.S. citizen, for example, and achieve residence that way, the parents could be part of the equation at a later step. And to answer your second question very briefly, there's a lot going on with the current Biden administration in terms of ending bad policy and initiating new good policy and better objectives to allow for individuals to immigrate to the US more easily and make the process more efficient and fair. I really recommend taking a look at our presentation, and there's really too much to go into, but if you reach out to us via email, I'm happy to follow up with you and answer any more specific questions that you have. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nishan. We have the next question from Surendra Ojha. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. We have the next question.
I am 1968 born, and I want to settle myself in Canada. What are the ways and what are the investment?
Thank you. The first way is that we need to be able to prepare an express entry profile for you. And I highly recommend that you get in touch with our team, myself, Arushi, and Dennis, and complete a Canadian immigration questionnaire so that we can give you an idea of where
As you have suggested, I am running my own company here in India since last 16 years. I'm in the field of wastewater treatment.
Excellent. So after completing an evaluation and considering you for express entry, we would then explore typically other programs, including the intercompany transfer, the federal skilled worker program, starting a business through one of the entrepreneur provincial nominee programs. And lastly, we may recommend something called C11 work permit for companies that are innovative or culturally significant for Canada. So because you have your own successful business, in this case in the wastewater treatment system, which is very related to environmental protection, which is hugely important in Canada and is favored by many immigration programs in Canada, I would recommend that you consider these entrepreneur programs or variations of entrepreneur programs. And overall, for families such as yourself, or businesses such as your business, we've been able to successfully allow them to land in Canada and obtain permanent residency.
Thank you.
Thanks, Surinder. We have the next question from Danish. Hi, Danish. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I have applied for a Canadian work permit visa from an consultant in Mumbai. I have paid him an upfront charges of 50,000 rupees so as to do my visa, but at least 8 months have passed. I haven't heard anything from that agent yet. Neither the process are starting from any other company. So there are many such companies which are operating in the Mumbai at the moment. Or are those people genuine, or are those people really they're going to want to do the process, or they don't want to do? So I'm totally confused that what shall I do with those money? Or how shall I apply for that process again? I'm worried about that.
Okay, so unfortunately, Canadian immigration consultants are very unpredictable in their quality, and I'm not going to say anything beyond that. What I can tell you is that we have a team of lawyers that have been literally working in immigration for decades. It's all we do, and our reputation means everything to us, and we care whenever we take on a case that we do the best we can for the family. So please get in contact with us. We'll try and guide you as best as we can. We've done it many times before where we are hired after the family has a terrible experience with a Canadian immigration consultant, and they contact us to try and fix their situation. We just had a family land in Toronto successfully after a very badly conducted labor market impact assessment last year by a Canadian immigration consultant. And the pattern was something like this: that they promised everything, they made a bad application, and then when things went badly, they refused to get in contact with the family again. So it was a very frustrating experience for them. And we were able to really do the right thing.
Thanks a lot. So what I have tried there, I would go with skilled worker visa, that is tier 2 visa for UK. As being a chef, as I'm having a skills for last 10 years, I would like to approach to UK embassy again to apply for.
Well, good luck, but please get in contact if you're considering Canadian immigration. Obviously, we can't promise success, but we can certainly promise to do our best to analyze your case and make sure that you understand your options for Canada. Okay.
Okay, we have the next question from Mr. Jilla. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I currently have a Canadian PR, and I have actually been in India for a year now. I came here for a visit to my family and got stuck here with the lockdown, and I couldn't go back. It's been a year now. So I actually have 3 questions regarding my situation. One is I need to sponsor my wife, and then the second is my parents, and the third is my citizenship.
It's really straightforward. It's very straightforward. So to keep your permanent resident status in Canada, you have to have at least 730 days of physical presence in Canada over the last 5 years. Okay, they don't have to be continuous 730 days, so you can have interruptions. Okay, but you generally want, that's the rule. So you want to keep your eye on that 730 days physical presence in Canada during the last 5 years. In relation to your spouse, it's a very straightforward. In relation to your spouse, it's a very straightforward spousal family reunification petition, and in relation to your parents, it's a super visa application. Okay, so it's a very clear case, and I think you'd be well served to get good advice on it. All right.
Okay,
actually,
thanks.
Sorry, just a small clarification to that.
We have a couple of questions lined up. You can visit their booth at the virtual show and get all your questions answered.
Sure.
We have a next question from Mr. Prabhat. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, I don't think he's, yeah. Hi, Prabhat.
Yeah, actually, I have been listening to all that you have been saying, but I'm not at home presently. So some of the information which you are sharing is going out of my ears. But anyway, I just want to tell you that we are a group of 3 friends and we would like to invest in a business in Canada. So how can we go about the process, and what would be the best way of applying for a visa and land up in Canada? We are all, 2 of us are already, we have crossed the age of 44.
Okay, so because of your age, you're likely going to skew out of the express entry program, and you're going to have to skew into one of the investor programs, whether it's the provincial nominee entrepreneur programs or the intercompany transfer or the C11 or something of that nature, like a labor market impact assessment, temporary work permit, and then a labor market impact assessment. So I think you're going to be in the realm of those other options and not straight through the express entry program. Nevertheless, typically you can obtain permanent residency in Canada on various programs with up to 1/3 of ownership of the business. And that means that each of your friends could invest 1/3 of the capital to start the business in Canada. And of course, then after that, we would design the visa strategy to allow each family group, so we have 3 families, we would allow each family group to land in Canada with temporary work permits, temporary study permits, and then eventually proceed to permanent residency. That cycle is really manageable. It does have, key moments. Number one, the design stage, which is at the very beginning where we design your visa strategy. Number two, incorporation of a Canadian company or more than one Canadian company, depending on the family's needs. Okay. Number three, capitalization and a business plan for the business in Canada. Number four, applications for temporary work permits and temporary study permits for each family group. And number five, the execution of permanent residency strategy. It doesn't happen overnight, but that cycle that I just described is what we do on a daily basis for our clients. And we are very, very experienced at it.
Okay, and one more question is, what is the basic resource that we require in order to invest? That is, we need to proceed or progress with a certain fund in hand. So what is the basic amount or the minimum amount which is required to start the process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I want to make it very, very clear. There are programs in Canada called provincial nominee programs for entrepreneurs that require a minimum net assets test for the family, okay, and a minimum capital investment, okay? But there are other programs in Canada that do not require either of those.
Okay.
So when we are analyzing your situation and advising you on a potential visa strategy, we will present both options to you to decide which is best for your family. And if we can avoid having you have to go through a minimum assets test and a minimum capital investment test, we will do that. You see my point?
Yeah, I got it.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you we'd be happy to help you. We really, I think we can certainly help you and your friends, okay?
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you. We have one last question that came in saying that how important is the Ielts score for investing into a business in Canada? And what is the program that you would suggest for a USD 300,000?
So in Canada, the Ielts score is tremendously important for many programs. Number one, express entry. Number two, federal skilled worker. It is not negligible for the entrepreneur programs. Typically, we have to have a CLB 5 or 4, depending on the program. So you do have to have proficiency in English or French to be able to navigate these programs. They're not completely exempted from them. So it is relevant. But the score goes down for most of the entrepreneur programs compared to the federal skilled worker program, which requires CLB 7. And I think they asked about US immigration 300,000. Is that right?
Yes.
So US immigration programs typically are based on, for that dollar amount, you would be looking at the L as in Larry, the L1 program, where a foreign business opens a new office in the United States, almost identical to the intercompany transfer program for Canada. In the United States, there's a similar program called the L1 program. And we would recommend that as your first choice based on the dollar amount of available investment, which is $300,000.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ignacio and Dennis, for such an insightful presentation. We have posted a link on the chat for the IREX Residency and Citizenship Virtual Exhibition. The Donoso and Partners team will be available at their virtual booth to speak to you and answer all your queries. Thank you, everyone, for your queries.